Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It is turning much colder throughout the next sort of 12 hours or so, as we do see a very brief Arctic blast moving in. It is going to be some pretty cold air, especially for northern regions, but as I said, it is very brief, only lasting probably to around Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning at the latest. There's a risk of a bit of snow, but for most it's just going to be a very cold feel and overnight frosts as well. Towards the end of the week, it is going to be turning milder once again with a westerly flow. But as we head into the weekend and the start of the following week, it is looking likely to turn colder once again. But it is looking likely to be a bit more of a longer lasting colder spell. We are going to see a northerly wind return once again around quite a big mid-Atlantic ridge. And as we see from the longer range charts, it does keep that cold air around for a good sort of 5 or 6 days before eventually the high pressure does topple and we do turn much drier, but still probably pretty chilly under an inversion within that higher pressure. Because it is so high pressure dominated in the longer term, it is expected to be cold, potentially even quite severe overnight frosts, but at the moment, not expecting anything too wintry because that pressure is so high. But of course, if we did see small areas of low pressure moving around, potentially areas of instability, there's always the risk of a bit of snow. But yeah, the middle third of December definitely looking like it is going to be well below average and quite considerably colder than we're going to be seeing later this week. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, to like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if we start on the live radar, you can see there are bits and bobs of rain around at the moment. And this is as a result of a sort of a weak cold front that's moving through, that's transitioning from cool air to particularly cold air coming in from the Arctic. We have got, as I said, a bit of rain across much of the Midlands, a bit of snow now over the higher ground of northern England and across Scotland as this cold Arctic air does move in. As I said, the rain will clear overnight tonight, and we are likely to see temperatures dropping towards freezing for many areas in the north and west, maybe less so in the south and east because it is going to take quite a period of time for that cloud and rain to clear, but maybe into Wednesday morning we could see a frost as well. But already here you can see northern parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and the Republic of Ireland as of 5:30 are already down towards sort of 1 or 2 degrees, if not starting to get below freezing, and that will spread more and more widespread over the coming hours. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, you can see all of that rain clearing southwards and eastwards over the coming hours, and that northerly wind continuing to push in through much of Tuesday. It's going to be a very cold day. Temperatures by day, maybe only 5, 6 or 7 degrees. And the same can be said as we head into Wednesday as well. We see a bit of snow potentially over northern Scotland. And for most other regions, it's still very chilly. Frost potentially into Wednesday where we avoid the cloud. And Wednesday's like to be another really chilly day. You can see the big weather front pushing in as we head into Thursday. This is going to bring in much milder air, and you can see already here all of this is falling as rain, so all that cold air is getting pushed away by Monday evening. A very soggy Wednesday into Thursday, very unsettled through Thursday into Friday, especially for northern areas, but more in the way of showers than longer spells of rain. And then slowly into the weekend we see another area of rain moving in, but it's once this clears that's when we start to see that northerly wind pushing in. Already by this point we have got cold air to our north, and it's this sort of air mass, if not colder than this, that is going to plunge southwards through Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. And you can see the very cold air moving in at the moment. It is really quite potent across northern regions, -8 to -10 degrees at 850 HPA. That's cold enough to give ice days if this were a bit more sustained. But as you can see, it moves in and very quickly gets pushed away through Tuesday into Wednesday, fully clearing into Thursday before cold air returns towards the weekend, but of course mingles with some milder air before fully taking over into the start of next week. Now, if you look at the temperatures, you can see overnight tonight temperatures widely down towards freezing for northern and western regions. Further south and eastwards, kind of middle to low single digits. And you can see through tomorrow afternoon not rising much above sort of the overnight lows. Tonight 5, 6, 7 degrees, maybe an 8 degrees somewhere across southern England. But most other regions further northwards are low single digits, so a really quite chilly day. And with the northerly wind, it will feel even colder than those thermometer temperatures. Into Tuesday night, into Wednesday, frost will develop where we see clearer skies, but of course it is highly dependent on the cloud and rain. So we'll have to wait and see, but pretty much anywhere here could drop towards freezing or below freezing. But we're seeing sort of 4 and 5 degrees here because the UKV is predicting a stretch of cloud across those central and northern regions. You can see as we head through Wednesday, even though the upper air temperatures are starting to rise, it is still pretty chilly, especially for northern areas, still low single digits, more towards the mid to high single digits further southward, and still feeling cold. But into Thursday, it's a milder for all. See, sort of low teens, 13, 14 degrees in southern regions. And by Friday, already starting to turn colder in the north, and it will be a very sort of transitional weekend. You can see a big wedge of 14, 15 degrees there across southwestern areas, towards freezing across northern areas, as we do see quite a big clash of weather of air masses here. Could produce some significant snow over higher ground in northern regions, but the air mass isn't quite cold enough to see anything to low-lying areas, so we're not expecting too much in the way of disruption. But a very changeable next 5 days, plenty of cold weather around with some milder interludes as well. A fairly standard west to northwesterly wind. The jet stream is slightly southerly tracking, which is allowing these colder air masses to dig in more, and because of the general pattern we've had over the last few weeks, the air just to our north is quite a bit colder than it usually is this time of year. The sea surface temperatures are colder as a result as well, so it just means that air to our north is a few degrees colder than normal, which means that these northerly blasts and brief northerly winds we see are just that bit more colder than we would normally expect. And that's why we're seeing these big oscillating conditions. But you can see plenty of frost, plenty of cold conditions, but equally there will be some rain and some milder temperatures, especially later on in this working week. As we see from the longer range, though, we are going to probably turn pretty cold and sustained cold weather during the middle third of the month. Now, you can see as we head towards this weekend, we still have a low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, but by Sunday into Monday, by the 8th, 9th of December, look at this, a pretty strong northerly wind. Now, you can see it is a mid-Atlantic ridge. It's not a block getting up towards Greenland, as it doesn't last all too long, this northerly flow, but it does sustain itself all the way through Monday into Tuesday before slowly toppling into early next week. Now here we have got chilly air masses, nothing amazingly cold, but chilly. Inversion would likely take place, and we would likely still see temperatures mid-single digits at best during the day, towards freezing overnight. Eventually some pretty milder air masses start to try and nudge in the longer term, but it really takes a long time. We just remain fairly chilly, and although it doesn't look spectacular here from the upper air temperatures, in terms of nothing really deviating massively below average, it is a couple of degrees below average, but it's nothing amazing. It's not snow-worthy. It would still be very cold because of that inversion taking place. If we go to this period here, for example, where the air masses aren't spectacular, very cold across Scandinavia, you can see big blues here. For us, it's kind of around average or slightly below average. Towards the surface, would be pretty chilly. Overnight temperatures here in the single digits, same by day. So it is going to be pretty chilly regardless. Not seeing much in the way of double digits here at all, even though the upper air temperatures aren't all too cold. And of course, the GFS run is actually on the milder end of what we're seeing. A lot of other runs do sustain that northerly or easterly for a bit longer. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but definitely quite a cold middle third of December is looking pretty likely. The same could be shown from the GM here. Again, a westerly wind over the coming days. Eventually, that northerly wind arrives through the weekend, turning really quite chilly. And you can see an easterly eventually develops into early next week and actually sustains itself quite a bit longer than the GFS shows. So this would be quite a bit colder and towards daytime. Eventually, we see the high pressure break down, but then we see perhaps another brief northerly wind and another colder air mass nudging in. So the GM here keeps us pretty chilly and pretty cold there. Easterly winds pushing in, so is the risk of some precipitation. Again, maybe some snow, but if we do zoom in, look at the dew points, you can see the dew points are a lot more transitional. They're nowhere near as dominantly below freezing, which means we're less likely to see snow, but temperatures would still be really cold. Look at the daytime temperatures there, 4, 5, 6 degrees. So it would be cold, but probably wouldn't be too wintry into that longer term. But yeah, definitely not seeing anything remotely above average here during that middle third of the month. All average to below average, all chilly, all cold, with the risk, a small risk of wintry conditions, at least, towards sort of the 10th to 15th. Maybe beyond the 15th, there is a risk of maybe something a bit colder and snowier. But at the moment, with this sort of north to northeasterly, maybe even flat easterly, it is likely to just be cold and fairly dry. And finally, if we compare to the latest ECMWF, again, that brief northerly pushing in at the moment, westerly flow continuing through the rest of this week. Eventually, that northerly wind arrives, and again, similar to the GM, it converts into quite a strong northeasterly to easterly wind into the longer term before eventually the high pressure does topple. It remains pretty chilly, and into the extended range, we continue to try and see that high pressure penetrating further into the Arctic, but doesn't really have too much success. And by the end of the run, we are kind of just sticking within that colder easterly flow with some pretty chilly conditions. And again, if we go into the surface, you see overnight temperatures below freezing, daytime temperatures doing particularly well either, probably low to mid-single digits. I think because the ECMWF is updating here, some of the data is missing because the midday run is just coming out. Again, if we actually just briefly have a look at it, you see it's only out on the first frame, so unfortunately we can't actually have a look at it in any detail. But nonetheless, ECMWF is pretty cold and fairly similar to the other runs as well. If you finish by looking at the ensembles, just quickly refresh the GFS here, you can see this fairly up and down pattern over the next 5 days, cold over the next couple of days, turning milder through the weekend, end of the week generally, and again, this is for London, further northwards would be probably a little bit more in the way of cold, and then longer term, look at that, we're well below average by a good 5 degrees, but we're not massively cold. Again, if we're looking at snow, we're looking at kind of -6, -7, -8 here. We're kind of -4, -5. So close to wintry conditions, but not quite there. And of course, the dew points as well do look very marginal, as we saw from those earlier rounds, the GFS and the GM. Longer range, though, you can see quite high confidence we're going to stay average to below average. Very few ensemble members getting above average. And this is why I said the middle third of December does look pretty cold. Whether it's wintry, whether it's snowy, it's difficult to say. At least the early part of the middle third, sort of the 8th to 12th of December, doesn't look too wintry at this stage. But maybe beyond that, we could see something colder getting pushed in. Of course, as we head more and more into the winter, those air masses to our north and east get colder and colder before they peak in January and February. So the longer this pattern persists, the colder that air will get, and the more likely we'll see something wintry. New snow depth, there are a few spikes longer term, but again, just shows you this sort of overall atmosphere is there for something colder, but we'll have to wait and see. And again, if we look at the dew points, you can see it is quite marginal. Yes, a period of potentially much colder dew points there when that direct northerly arrives Saturday and Sunday. But into the subsequent days, it does remain cold, but dew points generally freezing or slightly above freezing, which does mean that precipitation is less likely to be snow. We need it at 0 or lower, preferably, to see snow. So if it's above freezing, no snow would be possible. So that's why another caveat there. So it is a cold pattern, but it's not looking too wintry at this stage. Further northwards, however, looking at Glasgow, for example, it is a little bit colder, but it's fairly similar. You can see the upper temperatures are actually slightly milder, and that's probably because we're closer to the centre of the high here, where the upper temperatures do warm up a little bit, not getting drawn as much from the east. But regardless, you can see majority of the longer range is below average. If you finish by just comparing to the ECMWF ensembles, broadly it is very similar. A bit above average through this weekend, but longer term prospects looking average to below average and considerably below average around that 8th to 12th of December point. So it is looking really quite chilly as we progress through December. Nothing massively wintry on the horizon. There is, of course, always the risk of a bit of snow, a bit of transition, a bit of higher ground snow, maybe a few odd snow showers in the east. But we're not looking at anything too major at this stage. Just generally a pretty chilly, cold feel as we do head up into the lead up to Christmas. Potentially quite a bit of frost around as well. Maybe in the subsequent days, 15th to 20th, maybe towards the 25th, we could see something a bit colder. Of course, the atmosphere would be pretty primed for something cold with this high pressure being fairly dominant. All it has to do really is shift a bit further north and westwards, and we would draw in something quite a bit colder. Again, only need an air mass, 3 or 4 degrees colder, and it would be very, very chilly and potentially wintry. So all the cards are on the table, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a really quite chilly week or two leading up to Christmas. Certainly around the 8th to the 12th looks cold. The days following that do look chilly as well, just less confidence. And then, of course, we're into the week leading up to Christmas, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something colder there as well. we'll have to wait and see. Of course, our winter look aheads recently have suggested something colder in the lead up to Christmas, so perhaps this is all starting to take shape. But yeah, nonetheless, looking very interesting, looking very chilly over the next few weeks in general. We'll just have to wait and see if there's any wintry potential in the near future. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.